These are the moments that very nearly changed the course of MMA history as we know it. Maybe a half second more on the submission attempt, an inch or two to the left or right on a strike, and the very landscape of the fight game could have been changed forever. So let's take a dive into it. To this day, I haven't a clue how the late Kevin Randleman didn't cause some major injury to Fedor Emelianenko with this huge suplex, or at the very least, managed to sway the fight's momentum in his favour. But right in the peak years of Fedor's run through Pride, he came up against this powerful American wrestler and fell victim to perhaps the cleanest suplex we've ever seen in mixed martial arts competition, or at the very least the most iconic and most devastating at the highest level. Fedor should have come away from this one with some real neck damage, a concussion and also a loss on his record. And yet, within seconds of being hurled through the air violently, the last Emperor was once again on top, and he managed to find the submission shortly after. This was one of the most remarkable performances from the great Emelianenko, and to this day it's hard not to imagine an alternate universe where Kevin Randleman got the win. This one was kind of bizarre, not only because the 5'9" wrestler Kelvin Gastelum managed to rock the 6'4" kickboxer Israel Adesanya with a head kick, which makes no sense, but also because even though he had Israel clearly in trouble, Kelvin decided to shoot in for a takedown instead of trying to build off of his advantage. Sure, maybe his opponent's veteran savvy in the striking department, especially defensively, would have saved him, but if Kelvin had won this one by 4th round TKO, he would have become an interim champion, faced Robert Whittaker for the belt, and set back the last Stylebender's progress quite a bit. On the subject of the middleweight division, there was so much to love about Yoel Romero and Robert Whittaker's rivalry, and yet again Romero found himself on the losing side of scorecards that probably could have gone the other way, but in the 5th round of their rematch, Romero came the closest to actually beating the champion, dropping him with a huge shot before following up with big ground and pound strikes. Had he landed 1 or 2 more big ones, he may have stunned Bobby Knuckles enough to get the finish. But Whittaker persevered, survived, and left Yoel's place as one of the all-time greats to never win a belt set in stone. Do you think Nate Diaz sits up at night wondering just how things could have played out differently if he had really stepped on the gas in the final minute of his fight with the number 3 ranked welterweight in the world at the time, Leon Edwards? No, we don't either, to be honest, but even still, Nate clearly wasted precious seconds after stunning Edwards badly with a swift 1-2, taunting him and play acting instead of giving the pursuit of the finish his all. Could he have done it with a minute on the clock? Did he have that type of power? Maybe, maybe not. But this wasn't his best effort, that's for sure. The one-sided nature of Stipe Miocic's title-losing performance against Francis Ngannou in their rematch is what everyone remembers. Stipe looked pretty gun-shy against this new improved version of the Cameroonian, but in that finishing sequence, let's not forget that Miocic rocked Ngannou badly just a second before he rushed in and got nailed with the counter. Francis has an insane chin, yes, but this was the biggest punch he ever took cleanly, and had Miocic bided his time better, perhaps he could have swung this fight's momentum back in his favour. On a quick side note, if you're enjoying this content, be sure to let us know in the comment section below, subscribe if you haven't already, and hit the like button if the mood strikes. Anyway, back to the video. This is a recent one. The knockdown that Alexander Volkanovski scored on Islam Makhachev wasn't the most devastating strike we've ever seen. But despite Islam gathering his wits almost immediately, we can't help but wonder what could have happened if Volk had been able to fully posture up and hammer away with ground and pound like the Yair Rodriguez fight. Makhachev did very well to keep control over his opponent, even in his state, and he managed to avoid one of the all-time great comeback victories in the process. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the mark of a true champion. John Jones gets a lot of praise for his offensive work in the wrestling and striking department, but his mental toughness and his ability to endure is truly phenomenal and always has been. When Vitor Belfort latched onto a first-round armbar on this young champion, Jones would have been forgiven for tapping. The Brazilian legend Belfort had totally hyperextended his arm, and could have done serious career-altering damage to it had Jones not escaped shortly after. From there though, the champ's bulletproof mentality was proven when he turned the tides, dominating Vitor before submitting him later in the fight, one of his toughest title defenses. I think about this one pretty often, not because I don't believe that Tony Ferguson was already on the decline anyway, and would have lost sooner rather than later. It's not even because I think he had a chance against Khabib, or more of a chance than most people would have given him. But once he dropped Justin Gaethje with that big uppercut early in their fight, if it had just happened a little earlier in the round, instead of being interrupted by the bell, maybe we could have seen Tony Ferguson finally get an undisputed title shot. It's a fool's hope, I know, but this fight got really ugly for El Cucuy, and sometimes people forget that he had such a huge moment early on, one that was just unfortunate to be at the end of a round. How close was this guillotine on Khabib Nurmagomedov? Well, it clearly wasn't close enough to get the tap on a guy like the Eagle, and for all intents and purposes, it's little more than a footnote on a dominant performance he put on in his 28th fight. But it was certainly a good attempt that had Nurmagomedov in a spot of trouble. Could you imagine if Poirier had managed to make the minor adjustment necessary to put Khabib out or force him to tap? How that could have radically changed our perception of both guys. Mixed martial arts is a game of inches, sure, but it can also boil down to the most minute of measurements. Millimeters perhaps in this case. And finally, while we're on the subject of tight submissions in championship bouts, is there a more amazing submission escape in recent UFC history than Alexander Volkanovski's third round duo against Brian Ortega? Because if surviving that guillotine choke wasn't enough, the fact that Volk went on to escape T-City's signature triangle choke later in the round, yeah, this was a star-making performance, one that made a lot of people sit up and take note of Volkanovski in a way that the narrowly contested first two fights with Max Holloway didn't, at least for the casual audience. And the fact that Volkanovski ended his round on top of Ortega, punishing him with vicious ground and pound, just makes it all the more better. But anyway, that'll just about do it for our video. What moment that nearly changed MMA history, but didn't, sticks out in the memory for you? Do let us know in the comment section below, and if you want to like the video and subscribe to the channel, that would be great. As always, thank you for watching.